How an organized family keeps more business revenue. Okay, this is a simple but powerful idea. The simple idea behind this video is the fact that when a family has a family business, it is able to keep more of the money that the business earns. Okay, in order to explain the details of what I mean, I will talk about two different scenarios here. First scenario, we have scenario one as a solo entrepreneur, meaning one person who owns the business by themselves. And then scenario two, we have a family owned and operated business, meaning the family owns this business together and family members are the ones who are working together to operate this business. So first, in order to elaborate, I want to explain the similarities of these two scenarios. So real quick here, the first thing is to notice is that we have the exact same. This is like a abbreviated income statement. We have revenue, we have some expenses, and then we have the operating income that's left over. The same thing is true here. Revenue, some expenses, and then the income that's left over. Also, the similarities continue in the fact that the numbers are actually the same too. So you see the total revenue in scenario one is the 2.7 million, and then the total revenue in scenario two is also 2.7 million, and all of the other numbers are the same as well, culminating in the profit of $607,000 in both scenarios. $607,000 in both scenarios. Okay. So in order to explain why I think it's better for a family to own and operate these businesses together and show you some of the advantages of doing so, I'm going to use an example of one type of business. I'm going to use the example of a FedEx route. So some people may or may not know that you can actually buy FedEx routes. I think I mentioned that on one of my previous videos. But the type of business really doesn't matter. Really what's important is that it is a business that requires employees, meaning you buy this business. It's not a business that a person would own and operate as a solo entrepreneur by themselves. They will buy the business, and then this business can be bought, but there needs to be a staff to run the business. So basically, the idea that I'm talking about, the dynamics that I'm talking about, can be explained using any kind of business that has a staff. I'm just using this FedEx business as a example because it is a business that has to hire staff. Mostly it'll be drivers, and then they'll also have managers, but the point is there are multiple employees that a business will need to have, and it's that type of business that I'm trying to explain now. So like I said, the numbers in the statement is the exact same in both scenarios. So I'll just go through one of these scenarios to explain where the numbers came from. So first thing first, we want to talk about the total revenue, which is this 2.7. And if I go back to the listing, you see here total revenue 2.7 million. If I go back here to net operating income, which is the 607, I also got that from here, net operating income of 607. And then I basically subtracted the 607 from the 2.7 in order to get the total expense number, which would be this 2.1 million. But I further broke the 2.1 million down into the 1.2 million and the 800,000. And I needed to do that in order to make the point clear. So long story short, this business makes revenue of 2.7 million. It has expenses of this 1.2 million plus this other 800,000 for a total of 2.1 million. And then what's left over as the profit is this 600,000. Another thing that I want to make clear here is, okay, if the total expenses was the 2.1 million, how did I know that the salaries and wages should be this 1.2 million? And basically I went to this other article, and basically this is for a FedEx ground contractors route. It says the gross driver wages. Driver wages are typically the largest expense in any P&D operation. A healthy range will be somewhere between 37% and 52%. So I just chose a number that's close to the mid-range, the middle of that range, of 45%. So they're saying that the expenses will vary between 37% and 52%. So here I just chose 45%. So this 1.2 million is 45% of this 2.7 million. So we know that the salaries and wages are the 45% of the total revenue. And then I just lumped all of the other expenses into this line item for the 800,000. So total revenue of 2.7 million, total expenses of 2.1 million, and what's left over after those expenses are paid is the 600,000. Okay, so those numbers are true in both of these scenarios, from total revenue down to net income. Total revenue of 2.7, and then after all of the expenses, a total profit of 607 and 607 in both scenarios. Okay, so now let's talk about the gist of this video, which basically I want to talk about, the differences in these two scenarios. We've seen up until now that these numbers are the same, but what are the differences? And the differences are as follows. So first and foremost, as you can notice here on both of these statements, the salaries and wages is the largest expense. I mean, 1.2 million out of the 2.7 that's made. 1.2 million of that has to go to salaries and wages, and that is true in both cases. Now, the difference between these two cases, like I say, is the most important part of this video. Now, if you are a solo entrepreneur and you buy this business and you own this business as an individual by yourself, and then you have to go out there and find employees for this business, and most likely these employees will be strangers, like people that you interview and hire, and then they now come work for you. Okay, what that means is, even though you make 2.7 million, 1.2 million of that will have to be paid out to non-family employees, meaning people that you just met, people who really outside of the context of the job, you may not even know them. They may be strangers to you. But the point is, of this 2.7 million, you are going to pay out 1.2 million in salaries and wages. And if you are a solo entrepreneur who has hired strangers, then this 1.2 million will be leaving your possession, will be leaving the possession of your family. And that brings us down to the 607 profit. And the 607 profit is basically the gist of your take-home amount. So if you are a solo entrepreneur, you make 2.7 million, you spend all of this on expenses, including the 1.2 million, then what's left over is this 607. And what your family gets to take home is that 607, because that 607 is your profit. The rest of this money has went out of the business and out of your pocket into the hands of other people in order to pay your expenses. Now, that can be contrasted with what happens in scenario 2 when we have a family-owned business, a business that's owned and operated by the family. Now, it's the exact same numbers, but here, looking at the salaries and wages line here, if this is a family-owned business that is staffed by family members, then this 1.2 million is not actually leaving the family. It is leaving the business, quote unquote, but it stays in the family because the people who are working in this business, the employees, are actually family members. So this 1.2 million, instead of getting dispersed out into the world and out of the family's possession, it stays in the family's possession. Which means that what the family gets to take home as a whole is not only the 607 profit, but you can also add to this 607, add the 1.2 million, which means we have now 1.8 million that the family takes home, because they're taking home both the wages and the profit. So the salaries and wages on line 26, as well as the profit, is money that actually makes it into the family's bank account. The family as a whole gets to keep this money. Okay, so yes, that is the main idea of this video. When you have a family business, that even though that business is paying out money in the form of salaries and wages, that money, if that business is staffed by family members, then that money actually stays in the possession of the family. Okay, that is the main idea. I will wrap up the video with a few final thoughts here. Number 0, it's not just FedEx, but many businesses have similar staffing dynamics. For example, many of these, I just went to a website and pulled up some of these franchises. So any one of these businesses, whether it's one of these popular franchises or any, it may be a franchise you've never heard of, or any business that you've never heard of. If the business has the need for hiring a staff, then the dynamics could potentially work in a similar way to the way that I've explained in this video. So as long as you have a staff, you need employees. If you are able to hire your own family members as the employees, then the family can bring home a bigger chunk of the revenues that this business earns. Okay, so basically I talked about number 0 and number 1 at the same time. Moving on to number 2. This is why some businesses only hire family members or friends or others in their social circle. That's why some business, they're not interested in hiring strangers. They don't know you. They don't want you working in their business. They already know exactly who they're going to hire. And this is one of the reasons that that dynamic exists. Moving on to number 3, getting the revenue is the hard part. Once you have it, you try to hold on to as much of it as possible. Hiring family is one way to do so. So I think that's very self-explanatory. Sometimes the hardest thing to do is to go out there and actually earn the money. Figure out how can I get a contract? How can I make sales? How can I have money coming in? How can I bring in 2.7 million? Most of the time, this is the hardest thing. But once you have done that, then you should start thinking about ways to hold on to most of that 2.7. And one of the ways of doing so, as I mentioned here, is to hire family members. Lastly, number 4 here, I put it's even better when family lives together, because all income is not only family income, but it's also household income, meaning this money is not only into the family, but if we're under the same roof, all of this money is closer to being in one pot, where we are going to sharing our expenses, sharing our living space, sharing the advantages of making this money in the first place. And I kind of talk about, I have a video on my YouTube channel where I talk about a family compound, and you can kind of see if we were a family that was living on a family compound and also running a family business, how all of these things could come together and create a very beautiful situation. Okay, that'll be it.